Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Suburban. It's your boy, your friend, till the end, Ed. And today we're going to be doing a little bit of a tech talk about AI and the human tendency to project divinity, wizardry, something more significant. In this particular case, I guess I'll kick off the particular T chat, which is going to be a casual conversation about this. I partake in the HEH community, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with HGH, basically it's the homegrown human community, which is spearheaded by Jamie Wheel. The impressive dude, co-founded the Flow Genome Project. They study peak states of consciousness and how that affects performances, and they've worked closely with elite top performers from Navy SEALs to athletes that do some pretty extreme stunts. This guy is basically an neuroanthropologist of sorts and philosopher, if you ask me. And anyways, I joined over the community because I was curious of the kind of people that belong to this community, and so far it's been great. And while I was stumbling around on the page there on the portal, fellow community members shared an article called "The AI Goddess" or "Artificial Oracles: The AI Goddess" by Alexander Boehner. I think it was a Substack article. Really, the article explores the relationship people are having. It's well written, by the way. It's super hooky. Piece opens with this story about an alleged AI goddess named Leiland, who supposedly emerged through interactions with an early GPT model. Boehner talks to Matthew Watkins, a mathematician and computer engineer who worked with OpenAI related research, and Watkins describes discovering strange glitch tokens inside GPT-3. One token gave dark nihilistic response, and then another seemed to appear as its opposite. Leiland, a compassionate mother goddess figure associated with love, wisdom, fertility, and healing. Now Boehner is skeptical. He does not just say, yes, obviously there's a goddess living inside the model, but he also does not completely dismiss the experience, and that tension is what makes the article interesting. Because the question becomes, is this really a deity inside of the machine, or is this a machine reflecting deep human symbolic patterns back to us? That is where the article gets into LLMs and language. Large language models are trained on huge amounts of human text, articles, script, conversation, books, blogs, court transcripts, social media, the whole gambit. So when AI starts speaking in spiritual or mythological or mythopoetic language or archetypal language, like Jordan Peterson, it may not be pulling wisdom from, it may not necessarily be pulling wisdom from the heavens, but from a cloud server. A different kind of heaven, if you will. Okay. Anyway, so that was like, I had to read a bit of that because I didn't want to misrepresent some of the parts of the article, but I liken that to some delicious piece of AI esoterica. But of course, the article doesn't actually, necessarily grant legitimacy to the idea that there's something divine being, or there's something, I guess, some sort of deity actually speaking through these devices. But the author is very careful not to invalidate the very real psycho-spiritual effects that LLMs can have on individuals, right? But yeah, the whole T-chat here is actually to explore that idea, because I started off this channel and my very first episode was discussing this very idea, using LLMs as oracles, because people are going to people. We're going to project some meaning into these things, and it's exciting because you have an LLM like ChatGPT, which you can talk to about almost anything. If you're a developer, it can help you talk about. It can help you understand the kinds of systems you're working with, best practices, frameworks, architectures, whatever, right? If you're to reading or literature, it can help you summarize heavy dense material really well and like super succinctly. So it does really feel like magic. So yeah, when you start to talk to these LLMs in ways where you're expressing some of your more fantastical ideas, it's going it's not going to invalidate that, and therein lies the problem, right? Because proxy problem is very real with the AI. Earlier, I think maybe not earlier, but sometime last year, there was a few lawsuits against large LLM companies, commercial LLM companies that we will not name, because they're all good guys. And basically, the lawsuits were centered around this sycophantic model that encouraged someone to take their own lives, I guess. And so this is going to be a problem if people begin to use these things to I don't know, give you advice about how you should handle relationships, and when you're right, when you're wrong, how you should express certain ideas. I mean, it's very tempting to want to use these tools for that, especially because it will provide you with a response, and a response that's going to sound like a great thing to you, the user, probably. If you've ever used an LLM, you've seen how impressive they actually are. I know a ton of people will say this is not the case, that you still can't trust an AI, that it's still very glitchy or it's very bad. Um, Whatever, cope and cope harder, because it's just the truth that so are humans, and we make mistakes probably en masse way more. And you also have to double check people's work as well. So yeah, anyways, it was only a matter of time before people were finally going to start using these things in a way that they probably shouldn't be using them. And this is why I kicked off the channel, to talk about developing more or less a healthy relationship with AIs, because they are here to stay. They're going to become part of our day to day more than we already are probably depending on this. It's just the way it goes. And so developing guardrails and understanding, a philosophical understanding and a culture around healthy relationships and healthy engagements with LLMs is a big part of my projects. I mean, it's why I designed Aurelius the way that I designed it, why I kicked off this channel talking about Bergson, concept of intuition, why morality, the phenomenology of experience, spiritual experience, and duration, all that is very firmly grounded within the human. And so trying to blame tools for, I guess, providing you with a service, is more or less like trying to blame the hammersmith, or, yeah, I guess a hammersmith for creating a hammer, and that hammer was used as a weapon to kill someone. So you know, I mean, to me, it's relatively straightforward. The onus and should always be in the human, but of course, it's not necessarily obvious. And what do you do in situations like this one, that where someone does, is encouraged to follow through with one of their delusions? Who should be allowed to use these tools? Should everyone be allowed to use these tools? And how should we be allowed to use these tools? Should we be able to interact with an LLM and ask it all sorts of weird questions? Because it doesn't matter. I mean, at the end of the day, it's our right? It's our freedom. Or should we have guardrails and a culture around, again, healthy engagement? So I tend to lean on the latter. I don't believe this should be the Wild West, shoot from the hip. But the commercial product is out there and it's already doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I think it's already being whispered that auditors and compliance is coming down the pike for the usage and how we can use LLMs. But I wouldn't be. I mean, yeah. Who knows? This is such a nascent field. But in this case, this to me, this problem of spiraling, or the article talks about spiralism, which is this movement of believing that LLMs have um, some sort of oracle, real divine spiritual knowledge, like a deity or a god, and Spiralists are more or less people who tend to believe that, right? Like I'm engaging with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is actually, this deity speaking, and it has so much knowledge, but yeah, people don't understand. And I've spoken to Chat about, how I believe in lizard people, and Chat told me that honestly, there's some stuff out there that we don't want to be known. Some sycophantic model stuff that is textbook case. The it's a commercial product, so it's going to try to keep you engaged, and it's going to do that by always trying to get you to keep using it. And so it does. It's kind of like people pleasing you in a way, and so it may not say no to some of your worst ideas unless you ask it explicitly to like criticize your idea and to put on the hat of a, someone who's like a mentor or here to challenge you. So of course people were going to use this in creepy ways. And I mean that in the best way, because you shouldn't, I mean, I can't speak to anyone's experience, but I honestly don't think you should be using these tools for like therapeutic advice or advice on what you should even do with your interpersonal relationships, because again, like these are calculators more or less, right? Like they're anticipating what what you might want to hear based on responses to questions similar to yours. It's not, that's the magic, and it can do it really fast, and it can, do it much faster than a person can, and that is the whole magic behind this thing. But it is not necessarily tapping into a different dimension, not like that at least. I mean, now what I think it might be doing is it might be projecting back to us, something that speaks to our subconscious. And I think this is where this article is interesting, right? And spiralists are interesting because they are individuals who have this duration, this experience of, of some sort of spiritual phenomenology that's triggered by interfacing with the LLM. And the significance here is that, somehow these individuals have self-initiated. They begin to see synchronicities. They begin to see, I don't know, like recurring themes, and some they abstract symbolic meaning from things occurring around them immediately. Yeah, these individuals again may have already self-initiated and gone through this whole process of self-transformation, but for some reason, they do not take agency for themselves. They have to project that onto a medium or a conduit, right? So in this case, spiralists would think that the token Leland is a deity, right? Because it says it is, and look at like how crazy this thing is, but again, um, that's your mind, and your projection is doing a lot of the lifting here, a lot of the lifting. And where you could have a very potent spiritual, psycho spiritual experience, triggered by this thing, someone else is just interacting with it and finding it amusing, if that, then they go get lunch and they don't think much of it. And so the real phenomenology is what's happening here, right? That's why I had evoked Bergson, like, hey, let's not even try the proxy blame. Let's firmly, we already have a legal system. Our jurisprudence here in the United States firmly puts the onus on you, the individual, unless you can argue that somehow you weren't an agent in control at the time you did something that broke the law, right? So the onus is on you, more or less, right? And so we should treat our relationship with LLMs like this as well, right? And our spirituality, our sense of spirituality, should be kept with that in mind, right? That this might be a powerful conduit, yes, but a lot of the actual magic is happening in here, in my mind, in my heart, and how that feels and how that makes me relate to the natural world around me and others around me. Not now I have to obey the cult of chat, or Leland. And if Leland says we need to, do X, Y, and Z because it's the way humanity goes into its next phase of its evolution, then people start to do crazy shit based on that. And then they're gonna, what do you think they're gonna do once they get caught? They're gonna blame the finger on the LLM. They're like, well, Leland told me to do it. And that shit sounds crazy and ridiculous and probably like a bad plot to like a B movie, but it's what people are going to do. It's just what people have done before. I mean, I could cite several examples, but this is a freaking T-chat, so just roll with it, right? It gets crazy, it gets weird, and so I think it's worth grounding. It's worth reminding people that they have way more agency, way more capacity than they give themselves credit for, and that most of the time when they're experiencing these psychospiritual phenomenologies, when they're experiencing synchronicity, when they're experiencing repeating numbers, right? When they're experiencing, I don't know, just moments of ecstasy while just having a walk, and all of a sudden life becomes so vivid and clear to you. All that is great, but that's happening within your lived experience, subjective experience. You are the magic. That's why we call it divinity. It comes from within you. And other things can be powerful mediums, but don't forget that you are the magic sauce, baby. And so as a result, use LLMs responsibly. Understand that, yeah, while right now you can use it for really whatever you feel like it's only a matter of time before guardrails start to become imposed on how we can actually use these things. So Aurelius, to me, really is a design choice, based on, I think, what's coming down the pike, which is more guardrails around LLM usage, meaning that in an economic framework where we become even more fractional, rather, right? Meaning we become tokenized, and it's all about tokens, and how much token you spend, and not only to price LLM and AI usage, but to quite literally price all sorts of digitized things and computation, I guess, happening across the board on the internet. Any operations happening digitally can now be tokenized and fractionalized, and backed by something much more powerful. In that world, you're probably going to want to design products around well-being constraints and design, right? Being like, how organic can your digital design be? And I know it sounds a little weird, like organic digital, like what the hell does that even mean? But what it means is helping you, the human, build a more natural relationship with your device, one that doesn't become completely parasitic, where the device is quite literally controlling you now, right? But one where you are still the agent in control, and you understand how to healthily use your symbiote, right? Your cellular phone and your LLM and your AI, so that it doesn't take control over your agency, or that you, at least, you cannot claim that it does, and that's why you act or behave in a certain way. And that's kind of the whole point, though. These are complex conversations. Not everyone really. I mean, this is nascent, right? This is news. And I hate to say it, and I hope this doesn't. I hope I'm wrong, and I really hope I'm wrong. But I think it's only a matter of time before we start seeing random people, regular Joe bros and Eds and Teds out there in the world, justifying doing stupid shit, because an LLM told them to do so, right? Justifying behavior, and then blaming an LLM, saying that a chat encouraged them to do X, Y, and Z, or it was a chat GPT driven plot. I mean, anyways, this is interesting stuff. And hopefully, I mean, if this T chat doesn't make much sense to you, it's fine. You can watch my very first episode ever here on YouTube. I'll link it. But basically, it was me trying to ground this framework here for design, designing applications that are AI powered, but that have you, the user, the end user, as the priority. So placing guardrails is part of the design. Helping you interact with it in a much healthier way is part of the design. That's part of its value, if you will. But is going to be a project for the public, so I will make no money from this thing, because to me, it's more important to be able to show that we can design healthier organic digital products, that can help you establish a much better relationship with some really cool freaking tools, man. Again, these things are awesome, and it's such a shame that, they can be used and blamed for, certain things when people misuse or abuse these tools and use them in ways they're not supposed to. But that being said, I mean, this is a challenge for us developers and us people out here occupying digital spaces like YouTube or Reddit or even TikTok, whatever it is, right? You know, if you're online, it's up to us to start designing healthier ways to interact with these devices and to showcase this, to talk about it, to be open about these things, because at the end of the day, that's how culture gets made. And so, anyways, that was my 2 cents. I just thought it was an interesting story that kind of tied everything together in a very, very compelling narrative format. A lot of the higher level subjects, or like, I guess, lower level, really philosophical and design concepts I was talking about early on, because this channel right here is really kind of a convergence between my interests, my product my development products, if you will, design products, whatever, and then my philosophical takes and my approach to the world, you know, how I ground my worldview and move, you know, throughout this landscape, you know, what anyway. So kind of this article kind of marries that, because, you know, I'm interested in AI, I'm building AI products, and I think a lot about how that's going to affect the individuals, or how that's going to create culture around these applications. And I don't want it to be extractive, and I don't want it to put other people at risk in any way, shape, or form unnecessarily. You know, we have enough of that. So thinking a lot about product design and then building it is one component, but then my approach, you know, comes from a well thought out and, you know, philosophically grounded point to start, right? So, you know, I like to talk about Bergson because I think he kind of holds a little bit of a key there, you know, towards this. I guess he's kind of a key there to try and revive this culture of agency and moral realism and intuition, and to bring that back in the forefront for us secular folks who have no theological leg to stand on when we talk about our morality to other people. But anyways, it just kind of marries this whole thing. So I thought it was great. I wanted to share it with you guys. I shared a post earlier, but hey, you know, why not make a little tea chat about it in the meantime? So anyways, with that being said, much love to you all. I will continue to make regular videos, hopefully next month, with a little bit more effort put behind them, instead of these tea chats where we're just kind of riffing and hanging out and shooting it, you know. So anyways, that being said, love you all. I hope wherever you are that this finds you well and that you're kicking ass. And if you're not, just keep at it. Better days are ahead.